Arani, are you planning to apply to AU?
Well, I can't say I'm not considering it, but some insights would definitely be helpful.
Well, if you do apply there, you might get a few insights from our next speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Parth Sarwate, who has over 20 years of experience in the education and development sectors. Parth currently serves as the director for undergraduate admissions and financial aid at Ahmedabad University, one of India's leading private research institutions. Throughout his career, Parth has made significant contributions to educational reform and social change. He has worked with some of India's most respected social sector organizations, including the Azim Premji Foundation, the Azim Premji University, Ford Foundation, Shiv Nadar University, RPG Foundation, and Quest Alliance in Bangalore. His dedication to improve public school systems is evident in his leadership of efforts to reform 1,000 government schools in Bihar. He continues to drive impactful changes in education and has led pioneering ideas for higher education spaces like leading the design stage visioning and initial setting up of Azim Premji University and the Shiv Nadar University School of Education. Let's hear it from Mr. Sarwate, who will now join us on stage.
Good morning. So, thank you very much. I'm very pleased and excited to be here amongst all of you, especially the younger students here, because they are the reason why I chose this career. It's always a pleasure to work with young people because they have the power to change the world. And I chose education many, many years back, wanting to see how we could make radical reforms, a theme very close to my heart. So I'm very happy here to speak about this particular idea. What I'm going to do is, as I go along, I'm going to use a little slides because it will help young people actually follow the conversation. Now, radical reforms in education is a very interesting, contradictory idea because I was reading this wonderful book by two education historians, David Tiak and Larry Cuban from Stanford University. And they wrote this wonderful book called Tinkering Towards Utopia. And in this book, they talk about 150 years of educational change across the world, especially in America. And they say that actually there have been no reforms that have changed schools, but schools have changed reforms. So schools are institutions that are very powerful and actually are able to keep reforms from happening. And therefore, reforms in education have been slow. And as they say, it's tinkering towards utopia. But we live in a world that's changing very fast. And therefore, reforms are coming thick and fast in every domain. And therefore, there are going to be changes that is going to happen in education as well. And the key is how quickly are we ready to accept it? Not just as institutions, but also as individuals. And all these young people are going to be part of this reform movement that's going to happen in education because it's happening at such a rapid pace that even the institutions will have to keep pace. So let's talk a little bit about, before I go to talking about this idea of what is education, I'm going to talk about what is the purpose of education? What does it really do? So we are all born into a certain culture. That culture could be, when we get up in the morning, we talk about, somebody says Jai Shri Krishna, somebody says Salam Alaikum. So we grow up in this culture. And then this culture could also mean that I'm a boy, I'm a girl, it could mean that, okay, these are the customs we follow, this is the kind of language that we speak, I'm a Rajasthani, I'm a Gujarati, I'm a Maharashtrian. And then you go to school. And the school introduces you to a new world that is very different, and it gives you the opportunity to sort of understand what is happening around you. So you start learning, when the sun rises and we meet people, we say good morning. And at night, before we sleep, we say good night. So these are new things that you learn. So you're constantly learning new things and you're conforming to the world that is there. You're learning its rules, its boundaries, what's really happening in that world. And therefore, you're being introduced to the world and you're learning the world's ways. And that's the first purpose of education, which is to introduce you to the world. But education is more than that. Education is also an experience. It's not just an experience, it's a social experience. We live in a social world a world full of people. And education really allows you to connect to the rest of the world. So it's a social experience. But it's a social experience that curated, because you're going to a formal system where somebody's built this whole system for you to be able to engage with the rest of the world. And therefore, why am I speaking about all these things? As I go along, you'll realize that all of these things or themes actually connect with what I'm going to say about radical reforms in education. So believe this idea that it's a curated social experience. Now, there is a lot of new talk about why do we need to go to school? Why not do homeschooling? Why should we go to college? Maybe we can learn everything online. Maybe we can learn everything by working as an apprentice. But the reality is that you miss the opportunity to get this curated social experience, which gives you the opportunity to actually connect to the rest of the world. And whatever else you choose to do, you are not going to be introduced to the whole world. Education gives you that opportunity. The third thing the education does is actually very contradictory. It gives you the opportunity to not just know the world, but it also encourages you to change the world. So why are these ideas contradictory? Because at one point of time, you are understanding the world and you're following its rules and regulations and its boundaries. And at the same time, education also encourages you to go change the world, to reform the world. And this is often in contradiction because society lives in planned cultures. And therefore, when you go and come up with radical reforms or ideas that are going to change the world, there will be some opposition. There will be people who will say, oh, this is not acceptable, don't do this. And I'll give you one small interesting idea about the Harvard Business School in the 60s, began a very new and interesting experiment. They decided that business education should not really be taught by people reading books or doing research. It should be taught through the case study method. And they introduced the case study method, which no other schools in the world were following. So they wrote a lot of case studies. They went and talked to organizations all over the world, and they said, can we actually learn from you? And that case study method then became the norm. And every other business school adopted it. In fact, IIM Ahmedabad, just opposite us, also adopted this in the 60s, and they started doing it. And then the whole world started following this norm. So while the Harvard Business School began the reform, other people and other business schools around the world started conforming to it. I'll give you one more interesting example of drinking tea or coffee. A few hundred years back, nobody used to think of drinking tea and coffee, and tea was introduced to Indians by the British. For the wars that they were fighting, they used to give the people a sort of moment to relax and have a sip of tea. And that became a culture for everybody, all of us. We wake up in the morning and we want a morning cup of tea. And it's not just for us, it's around the world that people have adopted to this. Of course, it's a sales strategy, but it's a brilliant strategy because it's worked. Okay, in the US, they'll ask you to drink OJ in the morning. So what's OJ? OJ is orange juice. Maybe you don't need the orange juice, but it's a culture that's been created. So this is how education actually helps you to change the world around you. But we also live in a world which is an unpredictable future. So I think we need to know how is it that changes are going to happen in this world. Because unless we understand change, we cannot understand what do we need to do in this kind of changing world. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the change that's coming. The first change that I see coming, and I'm going to talk about 4 big themes that are going to happen, and they're inescapable. You're all going to be part of those 4 themes. There is a lot of new technology, innovation, and inventions. This is your world. You are digital natives, and you're going to see lots of technology changing the world around you. And not just digital technology, even other technologies. There are flying cars, there are wearable devices, there are implants that are going to be put in your brain. There are clothes that you can wear, which will be computers at some point of time. They'll be able to connect to other devices. Health sector reforms are happening all around the world. So there are all these new things that are going to happen, which nobody thought of a few years back, right? And it's not so different from when we grew up. I always say that 30 years back when I went to college, there was nothing called a mobile phone. But today, the mobile phone is part of our life. Similarly, you will probably have a flying car a part of your life, but you're learning today when you go to universities about the car, about the plane separately. Tomorrow, there might be one single way of learning, which is understand transportation in a very different way. So technology is going to change our world. The second thing which is going to happen is rapid urbanization. How many, as a society, if I were to ask how many percentage of people in the world live in urban areas, it's a very surprising answer. Today, 55% of humanity lives in urban world. Okay, in India, it's just 35% right now, and it's going to grow in India to about 55% by 2050, and 80% of the world is going to be in urban areas by 2050. And that's why the government has recently announced that they're going to set up 12 new cities. And we are still behind times because China has announced that they're going to set up 30 new cities and 30 centers around each of the cities. So that's 900 centers that are going to come up, industrial centers. And we are talking about 12 centers at this point of time. And of course, we are a different country, our requirements are different, but rapid urbanization is going to change everything. Now, why are these themes important? These themes are important because if you chose to follow these themes, then you will be able to do the most interesting things in the world that's coming. The third theme is uncertainties. You're all going to be children who are going to go through these uncertainties. Climate change is upon us. We are going to necessarily have a large wave of change that's happening on this planet, whether it's crazy flooding, okay, and it's a great thing that the rains went down, otherwise this event would have been in jeopardy. You all know that Vadodara is seeing huge floods. Kutch is seeing huge floods. Jamnagar is seeing huge floods. And these floods are not just in this state. Floods are happening all around the world. And we are seeing unlimited, unprecedented rain. We are seeing fog in Delhi, where you can't see the car next to you. So these kind of changes are going to matter a lot to you by 2050. Some cities that you know very popularly, like South Bombay, is going to be underwater. Why? Because seas are rising. There are also new health scares that are coming. I don't have to tell this young generation about things like COVID because you lived through it. You were probably the most impacted because your education was impacted. And this kind of health scare, this is not the last health scare we're going to see as human. There are lots of new viruses that are actually jumping from animals to human beings, and you're going to see more health scares. You're also going to see social unrest with a lot of authoritative governments and unhappy people who are protesting. Every country sees its share of unrest, and you're going to be probably caught up in it, whether it's Kolkata, whether it's Paris, whether it's Brazil, whether it's America, whether it's Japan. Everywhere we've seen social unrest happening. And the last was probably something none of you have to see ever, but the reality is that wars also happen on our planet and they threaten our survival. Now, why is this important? It's important because if we learn to avoid these, to prepare for these, we are going to be better. And the last one, which is again something that you can't escape, is AI and the rise of the machines. Now, I could talk a lot about this, but I'm just going to say one thing. I was just reading a few days back. The prediction is that 40% of the current jobs are going to be lost by 2030 to machines. I think all of you will be looking for a job by 2030. And if you're going to be looking for a job by 2030, if you don't choose wisely today, your job is gone. Right? So what are you going to do? And that's why it's very important to understand what changes are happening in the world. Okay? But if you do jobs that are slightly different, that AI cannot do, machines cannot do, then you'll not only have a job, you'll do well. And this is in a very deep way connected to education. Because what you choose to study today, what you choose to understand today, will help you in choosing a career. And that career is going to be in jeopardy if you don't choose well, if you don't think well about it, because the machine is going to take your job away. So can education prepare you? This is the main crux of the question before I go to what are the 4 big radical reforms that I see in education. The first thing is learn to do what machines can't do. If you learn to do what machines can't do, then you will always have a job. Now, what is it that machines can't do? There are lots of things machines can't do. And I'll talk about a few things. First is, machines cannot think and solve complex problems. This is the core of all learning today. If you can think about what are the complex problems that are around me, and you can start learning about them today, you will actually be able to change the world, and you will actually thrive in this new world. Second thing that you need to do is understand social problems. Machines cannot understand social problems. We live in a world that's full of people. If you can understand what ails people around you, you can solve that. That's what you need to learn about, and that's what you need to do. This is how I chose education. I saw that one of the biggest challenges I saw in the world was how people were getting educated. So I said, okay, I'm going to choose education as a discipline and work in that. So if you understand social problems, it will give you a lot of possibility of growth. The next is ask questions, and I don't need to talk about it, often, and I'll talk about one reform later, which is very interesting, but exams should change in our world. Why should they change? Because you are asking, they're asking you the question and you're answering it. But with AI, he who asks the best question gets the best answer. So learn to ask questions rather than give the answers. The more questions you ask, the better your understanding will be. The next is learn to be compassionate, caring, and contribute to society. This is a key thing. I think this is one thing humanity is really losing in this, dog-eat-dog competitive world that we are entering. Everybody wants to elbow the other person out and say, I am ahead of you. In this world, the key is going to be for people who are going to be compassionate, caring, who want to change the world, who want to heal the world, who want to protect the world, who want to make a difference to people around you. They are going to actually succeed. So if you choose to do that, try to ask the right questions, make an effort to understand the problems, and do that. The next one is learn to work with others. Believe me, the age of competition is gone. It is the age of co-optation. The more people you can work with, the more people you can convince, the more changes you can do. It's fine to say I came first in class, but beyond that, when you join an organization, you'll have to work with people. If you're going to become a politician, you have to work with people. If you're going to play in a team, you have to play with other people. So one thing you have to learn very early on is to work with others. And I was very happy to see that there's a committee that's working on this, and they've all worked together, and their speech was also very well distributed. So that's how it should be. And the last one that I'm talking about, okay, let me see if it's showing. Okay. So learn to work with others. And the last one is to embrace diversity. Because in our world, we have become small islands. We all care only for that island. The minute you start caring for people beyond that, and you embrace the diversity of the world around you, then you will be solving for the world. And the best example I can give you is of Edison. When he invented the light bulb, he didn't say, okay, great, I have now the light bulb and I'll do all my research even at night. He actually made sure everybody in the world had that light bulb. And he made sure that there were systems so that the light bulb could reach every corner of the world. And that's why we have innovation. So when you start thinking about new ideas, make sure you embrace diversity, solve for everybody, and make sure it goes everywhere. And lastly, on this slide, I want to talk about this because I think this is the main thing. Be the change you want to see in the world. So change yourself, look at the change you want to do, and work towards that. This is, of course, Mahatma Gandhi's famous quote. And this is what you need to do. Now let me go to the 4 big changes that I'm going to see that I think will change education. The first, very surprisingly, is tech, T-E-C-H. Okay, and I'm asking, is it the new spelling for teacher? Okay, yes, probably it is, because you are going to have to learn with technology. You are going to have to say that the teacher is actually the facilitator in the class. They are the guide, they are the mentor, they are not the person who's going to teach you. The teaching can happen from all the resources that is available to you. In our days, there were no resources. We had only a library that we could go to. And depending on where you lived, that library had limited or large collections. but you have unlimited collections. You have the world, the internet for you. And how are you going to really use TECH to really teach yourself? And this is a new thing. The more you want to learn, the more better you'll become. The second big one that I believe that will happen in education is examination reforms. These days, nobody solves a problem for themselves. Why are we still doing examinations that are individual? Nobody cares if you know the whole thing. Today, you can just pull up your mobile, pull up your computer. You can almost find any information that you want. What is the value of knowing that information? What we need is group assessments. What we need is people working with each other to solve a problem. If you can do that, that's how assessment should be across education sectors everywhere in the world. The second thing is learning to think. Education is about learning to think. The teacher should be speaking only 30 to 40% of the time in the class, and the students should speak. Because you must learn to think. So when you go to a university, as these two girls were saying earlier, you should go to a university which is going to help you to think. It's not what the professor thinks, it's how you are going to learn to think. That's very critical. The third is learning to communicate. If you have a great idea, the big thing that you need is how to communicate. So that's something that you need to learn. And lastly, solving with others. As I said, it's key that you must be able to work with others. No, you can't solve any problem in the world all by yourself. Even the most complicated problem, you're always standing, if you're doing research also, you're standing on the shoulders of giants. You're already looking at what others have done, and that's how you're solving problems of the world. Next is doing is learning. The big question that all corporates, all hiring people are going to ask, can you do it? Don't spend time just becoming academically great. Doing well on exams is passé. I think it's more important, can you do it? Can you actually learn how to do it? Go out there, do projects, do internships, take up ideas, try to solve them. Because that's what is the new change that should happen. And the whole world is going to move towards that. A few decades back, a number of educators got together and set up Olin College of Engineering. Olin College is a new sort of horizon in how engineering colleges should be. Engineering colleges have always been about problem solving, but not so much about complex problem solving. And Olin is really changing the world. So look up what they are doing. It's very interesting. And the last one that I'm going to talk about is interdisciplinarity. Learn about everything. Don't say this is my domain, this is what I want to learn. I work in education, but I read a lot about science and technology. I read a lot about social and humanities, social sciences. I read about what's happening in life sciences. Because the more you know about what's changing in the world, the more difference you can make. So these are the 4 big reforms that are going to happen. And let me talk about the last slide quickly. What can you do to succeed? So explore wide diversity and ask questions, be curious. This is the mantra that you need to have. So if you feel that, you will stop learning when you finish your undergrad, or you stop learning when you finish your, master's, you're wrong. You're going to have to learn for your whole life. And you don't need to do a degree. You just need to be a learner. You just need to say, what can I learn from everyday experience? Reflect on it. That's what's going to make the change. Ask very interesting questions. Constantly be curious. Oh, how did this really happen? That's what you want to know. Second is, do not settle. Aspire for the best. One of the things, you heard that I went and studied at Harvard. I was a very bad student in school. I actually almost failed in maths. I didn't do very well. So a lot of people ask me, how did you get into Harvard? When I took my GRE, a lot of my friends told me, don't apply to Harvard, you're wasting your money. But I said, I want to apply because I aspire for the best. And I know I won't get in if I don't apply. So I said, I'll take a chance. Okay, which is what I talk about the next one, which is take risks. So I applied. And I got in. And I didn't just get into Harvard, I got into all 5 universities I applied to, 2 Ivy Leagues, because I believed in myself. So what I want young people to do, and I've been counseling for the last 20 plus years, lots of students in India never apply for the best universities because they think they're never going to get in. So change that perception. You can get in if you aim for it. And if you don't, it's fine. But aspire. It's very important. Then learn by reading deeply. This is something that I can't say enough about. As a generation, we've only learned to read novels, fiction. It's great to read fiction, it's great to read good fiction, but you have to, if you want to change the world, start reading non-fiction. Read deeply, read every day, read the newspaper, make it a habit to read every day. This is something, if you don't do, somebody else is going to be ahead of you. This is the key to changing the world. Learn how to do things, and discuss with each other. As I keep saying, and that's why I'm saying many times that the key is how do you solve things with others. Degrees and exams are not important. It's how you do things. That's why we are in a new world where everybody is setting up new organizations. And the last one that I want to tell you is this is a new world. I know you've all heard of the Mahabharata, where there was a Arjuna, there was a Karna, there was a Eklavya. This is the world where you be the Arjun and you be the Eklavya. Learn for yourself, have a guru, learn from them also. Don't choose either. Be both. Thank you.